In this video, you're going to learn how to answer teamwork-related interview questions. And for those of you who are engineers, this is what's also known as your non-technical interview questions. And this was actually a video idea that came from one of the comments in my other video. So I do read all of the comments that all of you put down there. And again, if you want any other types of video topics to be covered, put them down in the comments and I will be sure to make videos on that so I can be as helpful for you as possible. All right, let's dive on into the video. And if you do find this helpful, don't forget to subscribe or share it with a friend. All right, so first we're going to talk about why they actually ask these teamwork-related interview questions, even for technical roles like software engineering. And basically that's because no one ever works alone. Even if you're spending most of your day individually coding or working on a bug, you're still going to have to work in a team environment in order to push things to production or just to get things done and work on projects. And every company knows that being a good team player has adverse effects, not just for you and your manager, but for the rest of the team. And really importantly these days, especially for all of these tech companies, being a good team player, being able to demonstrate teamwork and leadership are really important skills that they want to make sure that everybody has. Because let's be honest, nobody wants to work with a jerk. Also, managers know that working well in a team and having good teamwork fosters collaboration, innovation, but most importantly, retention, which is going to be critical for any company. So they're looking for reasons here not to hire you. So make sure that you can demonstrate that you work well in a team environment so that you aren't a flight risk and you won't cause other people on your team to leave that company. And also, please do keep in mind that not all companies look for teamwork and leadership in the exact same way. So you're going to want to make sure you do your homework beforehand so you know what type of style and culture each company has and what they would prefer to hear. The easiest example that I always recommend people looking at is Amazon's leadership principles up on their website. This clearly tells you what type of teamwork and capabilities people want to see when you're answering these teamwork-related questions. Now, I know what you're thinking. What if you can't find a company's leadership principles, or you asked the recruiter and they weren't very helpful and they weren't able to give you any hints as to what to talk about? So in general, I would say every company wants someone who's collaborative, is able to work in a team environment, cares about the other teammates that they have, not just themselves, but also isn't afraid to be a little assertive when it's appropriate. And knowing how to be assertive for the right things, maybe you know that there's a certain solution you want to implement, or that the company or the team is making a wrong decision and you're pretty sure that your idea is the right one. How can you actually get that across to your teammates without coming across like a jerk? So these are probably general things that you're going to want to keep in mind for every single company, and make sure you practice stories that can demonstrate this. All right, so now let's talk about some common teamwork questions that you can expect in an interview and how to actually answer them so you don't get rejected. So a common question you're going to get is, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker and how you resolved it. Now, make sure you use the STAR interview method to answer this. If you don't know what that is, check out that video right here. But after you use the STAR interview method, make sure you're able to talk about not just the result of how you resolve this conflict, but also talk about the result or the impact that solving this particular conflict had for your team, the product, or the business. Make sure your result is unpredictable. They already know that you're going to talk about how you resolved a conflict because that was the interview question. So make sure you're able to talk about something else besides that. Another question you want to be prepared for is, tell me about a time you asked for feedback and then how you incorporated it. The key to your answer here is making sure that they know you proactively asked for feedback. You didn't just wait for it, or you made a mistake and then your manager had to tell you about it later. Make sure you emphasize that it was proactive on your behalf. And make sure you don't talk about a major weakness that you have that is critical for getting hired in that job. If you're going to talk about some feedback that you were given, make sure it was for something small, and most importantly, make sure your answer talks about how you were able to incorporate that feedback and how you actually made an improvement after receiving it so that you didn't make that same mistake multiple times, because that's really what they're looking for here. Another common interview question is, imagine you had to give feedback to one of your coworkers or teammates. How would you do this? First off, make sure you emphasize to the interviewer that you love getting feedback and always ask for it yourself, if this hasn't already come up in the interview. But when you are talking about how you would give feedback, make sure you talk about one of those feedback techniques that everybody always uses. The one I always mention in my interviews is the compliment sandwich, where basically I will give a compliment and then I'll give some negative feedback or improvement areas, and then I'll end it with another compliment. And when you're talking about how you would deliver the feedback, make sure you are able to clearly articulate how you would keep the person's feelings top of mind and how you want to make sure that you come across as a collaborative, helpful teammate who's only trying to make them get better, not trying to knock them down or trying to get them fired. One thing that I always talk about when answering this question is how I would approach that teammate that I want to give feedback to. And first, I would ask them to give me feedback on myself, genuinely, so I can actually improve and get better in the job. And then I would ask them if they ever want to receive feedback as well, I would be open to giving it. And if they don't ask it at that point in time, that's totally fine. I don't push it. But then I will wait for the right moment where I can actually pull them aside now, and I would be willing to proactively give some feedback to them. But I would talk about how their feedback was so helpful to me and my career, and now I just want to repay the favor. Another really common teamwork related interview question is, what are the qualities of a successful team and how would you foster those? For this question, I specifically recommend you read the Google article that talks about what makes an effective manager and an effective team. I know most of the article is geared towards what it takes to be a good manager, but all of the principles still apply in terms of working in a team environment and being a good team player. So read that article and make sure you pull out a few of those qualities in order to answer this question. The one that I always talk about in my interviews is being able to create psychological safety for my team. And then you always need to talk about how creating psychological safety allows for a lot of innovation. And I would make sure that I foster this by always encouraging my teammates to share their ideas, complimenting them whenever they do speak up in a meeting, especially if I know that they're a little on the shyer side, and making sure I'm able to manage team meetings if I know that someone has a very dominant personality and tends to take over, that I would try to get other people involved and make sure that they can be prepared for some of these meetings so they don't feel like I put them right on the spot. All right, so with all of these interview prep videos, I always wrap up by talking about common mistakes that I see people make when they are answering teamwork related interview questions. And the first really big mistake that I see is not recognizing that you're being asked a teamwork related interview question. This is especially true for those of you who are interviewing for more technical roles or engineering roles. A lot of the times you are really just expecting a technical question and you may not recognize that they're actually trying to probe on your teamwork and how you would work well in a team environment. I've also noticed that many engineers tend to talk a lot about the technical difficulties they ran into in a particular project or a technical conflict that they had with a coworker and how they resolved it. But remember, these are teamwork related interview questions and they're not really trying to focus on your technical skills anymore. They're trying to understand how you work well in a team environment. Another common mistake is not talking about how you worked well with your team. Usually, what people do is they just give a very broad-reaching general statement that they believe is enough to convince somebody that they're a good team player. Like, I took a collaborative approach to solving this problem, but not actually explaining how you did that or what that really means. How do you make sure that everybody gets involved and everyone feels like their opinions are heard and valued? And how you're able to take all of the different ideas from people on your team to actually present a much more complete and thorough solution. And this may seem kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised how often it happens. But another common mistake is not actually practicing these teamwork related interview questions when you're studying and preparing for your interviews. I know the majority of your interviews, probably 70 to 80% of your interview questions, are going to cover the technical aspects of your job, whether that's marketing, finance, sales, engineering. So I do agree that you should spend the majority of your time practicing for those interview questions, but you're going to also want to make sure that you have these teamwork related stories and examples nailed down. You don't want this to be the reason that you don't get a job. And another common mistake is when you are talking about giving feedback or working through a conflict with someone on your team is bad mouthing your teammates or your boss. Nobody wants to work with a negative Nancy or someone who they believe would just throw someone under the bus or talk bad about them behind their back. So make sure you're very cautious about how you tell your story and how you talk about these conflicts or mistakes that some of your teammates have made. All right, so now you know what is the whole point of these teamwork and leadership related interview questions. You know some common interview questions to expect and you can study for them, as well as how to answer them correctly. And of course, you know what are some common pitfalls and mistakes so you can avoid them as well. If you found this video helpful, make sure you drop a like or subscribe if you haven't already. And don't be afraid to drop a comment in terms of what other videos you want us to make. And thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't be afraid to shake things up.